Hey you guys, so this is the notes for quantitative methods. So first, just know whenever we're talking about different methods, AP Research says that we can use methods to explore three different things. We can explain something, explore something, or create something. However, I don't think anyone in our classes are doing a create method. That's where you would perform something. So we're going to kind of focus on explaining things and exploring things. All right, so the types of research you can do. For us, we're going to focus today on quantitative methods. So quantitative methods use deductive reasoning, they use precise measurements, they build evidence in favor of specific theories or hypotheses, as opposed to qualitative methods, which are a little bit more subjective and are using sort of like the natural surroundings. A mixed method approach is where you combine both together. Usually that you are taking qualitative data to help you understand quantitative data. So another way to look at this is the word quant, right, means numbers. And so quantitative data, but also quantitative methods use numbers to measure data and variables, and qualitative uses words
guys.
maybe to
So
code
this is the
data and variables.
notes for quantitative
So a mixed
methods.
methods approach that combines these two things
First,
might
just know whenever we're talking about different methods,
give a
AP
survey
Research says
asking
that we
students
can
about their favorite
use
holiday.
methods to explore
Right.
three different
And
things. We
then
can
I have
explain
them rank
something,
each holiday,
explore something,
according to
or
which one
create
they like
something.
best. I have them
however, I don't
compare
think
different
anyone in our
holidays,
classes are doing a
comparing
create method.
what
That's where
about
you
them
would
perform something, maybe rating them
so
on a
we're gonna
scale
kind
of
of
like
focus
1 to
on
10,
explaining things,
where
and
10 is like
it's the best and we love it so much, and 1
right.
is like
So
really
the types
low.
of research you can do,
And then perhaps that doesn't give me enough data, enough
on
information. I might
quantitative
follow that
methods.
up
So quantitative methods
to
use
understand
deductive
why,
reasoning
perhaps by asking
they use
them some
precise
questions,
measurements,
maybe interviewing them
they build
about some
evidence
memories
in favor
tied
of
to
specific
specific
holiday
theories or hypotheses.
in order to fully
as opposed to
understand
qualitative
the
methods, which
the
are a
overall
little bit more
idea of
subjective
student holidays and are using sort of like the natural
The
surroundings.
other thing is
Mixed method approach is where you
quantitative
combine
methods
both together.
tend to be the scientific methods,
Usually
well
that
aligned.
you are
They
taking
use
qualitative
deductive
data to
reasoning.
help you understand.
That is where you have an
quantitative
idea,
data.
and then you collect evidence.
So
And then
another way to look
you
at this
might
is
come
the word
to
quant,
a
right, means
sort of
numbers,
general
and so
conclusion,
quantitative
right?
data. Inductive reasoning is where the
quantitative data, but also
opposite. You
quantitative
have
methods
evidence,
use numbers
you have
to
an
measure data and
observation, you have
variables,
something
and
interesting,
qualitative
and that
uses
leads you to
words maybe
form
to
a
code
working
data
theory
and
or
variables.
hypothesis. So a
So
mixed
if you think
methods
about Sherlock
approach
Holmes,
that combines these two things,
sort of looking for clues
might
and noticing things about people, making observations,
survey,
and then using those to
asking
make
students
predictions
about their
about
favorite
those people,
holiday, and then coming up with a
and
conclusion. As
then
in,
I have
them rank each
they're the
holiday.
murderer,
And
according
that's
to which one they
inductive
like
reasoning.
best.
I have
Deductive would
compare different
be,
holidays.
I
comparing
think,
what about them?
oh gosh.
Maybe rating them on a scale of like 1 to 10.
Deductive reasoning
where
is sort of the
10 is
opposite,
like, it's the
where
best,
we're
and we
starting
love it
off
so
with a
much, and 1 is
hypothesis,
like really
collecting
low.
information,
And then
analyzing
perhaps
data.
that doesn't give me enough data, enough
All right.
information. I might
Types of
follow
sources,
that up,
we've talked about this before,
to understand
but
why
you
perhaps
can
by
either use
asking them some
primary
questions, maybe
sources,
interviewing them
in your
about
data,
some memories
or
tied to
secondary
said
sources.
holiday in order to
This is
fully
kind of more about
understand
where we're getting our
the
information
the
from, right?
overall idea
So
of student
primary
holidays.
information or primary data is where we
The
are
other
going out
thing
and performing
is
studies. We're generating or
the
collecting
quantitative
the data.
methods
Tend to be the scientific
secondary
methods.
is
They're
where
pretty
we're
well
using
aligned.
data that's
They
already
use deductive
exists.
reasoning.
That
Usually
is
in
where
an
you have an
archive
idea
of some
and then you
sort.
collect
So this might be
evidence,
data that's already
and
available
then
to us
you
about
might come
schools,
to
about medical records,
sort of general conclusion,
about
right?
the historical
Inductive
record,
reasoning
about
is where the
people
opposite. You
lived,
have
where they
evidence,
worked,
you have an observation,
you have something interesting,
and
and
then
that
primary
leads you
we're actually
to
like going out
form
and
a
collecting
working
that.
theory or
So
hypothesis.
the pros
So if you
of
think about
primary
Sherlock
research
Holmes,
is that you are in control,
sort of
you
looking
get to
for
decide all the things,
clues and noticing
and the
things about
cons
people,
are
making
that
observations,
and then
takes a lot
using
of time,
those to
and
make
then
predictions about those people,
especially
and then
that
coming up
it
with a
can
conclusion,
be
as in like
not quite as
they're
rewarding,
the
especially
murderer,
if you're
and that's
on
inductive
a
reasoning.
time limit like you
Deductive
guys are,
would be,
right? Because if I go and I ask 50
think,
people and only one of them answers, then it's
gosh.
not for lack of trying on my part.
Deductive reasoning is sort of the opposite, where
Secondary
we're starting
data
off with a
is
hypothesis,
more,
collecting
it's easier to work with
and then
because it's
analyzing
already
data.
available, it's already collected for us.
All right,
But we're kind of stuck to
types
what we
of
get,
sources,
right? We've talked about this
if we
before,
find something
but
interesting,
you can
and then
either
we find
use
that there's part
primary
of this data that's
sources
missing, or
in your
maybe
data
that they
or
didn't
secondary sources.
give us the full idea
This is about our
kind of more about
participants,
where we're getting our
then that
information
can be
from,
kind
right?
of a
So
letdown
primary
too.
information,
And also we got to
data
think
is
about as
where
high school
we
students,
are
we're kind of
going out,
information
performing
from secondary
studies,
data is
generating and
available
collecting
to
data.
us, and are we likely to
Secondary
get it,
is where
right?
we're using data that's
Because
already
you can absolutely
exists,
do usually
really,
an
really
archive
cool of some sort. So this might be data
analysis
that's already available to us
about
schools, about
people's
medical records,
like ability to
the
cope
historical
with
record about where people
cancer, perhaps
lived, where they worked,
what
they
are the
spent money on, that
chances
kind of
that
thing.
you're gonna have access?
And then
that kind of
primary,
data.
we're actually like going out and collecting.
Right, so
that.
quantitative methods.
So the most important one
primary
is
research
the
is that
experiment.
you are in
Thinking about
control.
quantitative
You get to
methods,
decide all the
experiments
things, are usually what
and the
pops
cons
into
are
mind.
that it's
you should be
takes
kind
a
of
lot of
familiar
time,
with these,
and then
from
especially
biology,
that
chemistry,
it
physics,
can be
taken any upper level science
quite
classes,
as rewarding, especially if you're
especially
on
then you have
a
performed
time limit
experiments
like you guys
before.
are.
We just
right?
told you which
Because if
variables
I go
to
and I
work
ask
with.
50 people and only
So
one of
experiments
them
test the
answers,
hypothesis. Then it's not for
by
lack of trying on my part
just one
that
new
I'm not getting all
variable,
our responses.
and then measuring the effect.
Secondary
it has.
data is
The cool thing about
it's
experiments
easier to
is
work
it
with
lets you just
because it's already
isolate
available,
one
it's already
variable.
collected
So
for
it
us.
lets you measure
But we're kind of
one
stuck
thing
with
at
what
a
we
time.
get,
It lets
right?
you say, hey,
So
this one
if we
thing,
find
if I
something
change
interesting,
it,
and then
then
we find
it
that there's
changes.
part of this data
Maybe
that's
it's
missing, or maybe that they
experiment
didn't
is the only
give us
method.
the full
I
idea
cannot
about our
understate this enough.
participants, then that can be kind of a letdown too.
Overstate this enough.
And also, we got to think about
can
as high school
establish
students, what kind
cause and
of
effect.
information,
So
what kind of
you
secondary
cannot
data
say
is
that something
available
causes
to us,
another thing to happen
are we
unless
likely
you
to
do
get
an
it
experiment.
right? Because you can absolutely
technically
do
speaking,
a really,
only
really
certain
cool
science fields get to
analysis
say that
of
something causes another thing.
people's
I know sometimes
like,
it seems
ability
like
to cope with
obviously this is
cancer,
caused by
perhaps.
blah blah blah.
But
But if
what
we're
are the
talking
chances
about
that
sort
you're
of
gonna
these
have
larger
access to
societal
data?
studies,
then we
right,
can
so
just say that
quantitative
things are
methods.
supported.
The most important
by
one is
our
the
ideas. We
experiment.
can't actually say
When we
that
think
they
about
are
quantitative
caused by
methods,
something. Experiments are usually what
and then
pops
also an
into mind.
experiment, you get to
You should be kind of
randomly
familiar with these
assign
from just
different
biology,
variables
chemistry, physics,
to different
if you've
groups,
taken any
or
upper
perhaps
level
different
science classes,
participants to different groups.
especially then you have
And
performed
that
experiments
kind of
before.
helps
We
tie
just
in here
told
too.
you which variables to work with.
So starting
experiments
off
test
with
the
the hypothesis. This is part of an
by
experiment, but a
introducing
hypothesis
just
is something
one
that you're going
new
to have,
variable,
and then measuring
regardless
the
of what
effect it has.
quantitative study
The
you
cool
might
thing
do.
about experiments is
The
it
thing
lets
about
you
a
just
hypothesis
isolate
is it's
one
gotta
variable.
have a
So it lets
direction.
you measure one thing at a time. It
Usually
lets you
need
say,
to
hey, this
pick
one thing,
how
if
you
I
think
change it,
X is going
then
to change.
it changes
Y.
my dependent variable.
So if my
experiment
study
is the
that I think
only
sleep
method,
deprivation
I cannot
will
understate
affect
this enough.
student scores,
Then I usually have to make a
cannot
prediction
overstate this
about
enough.
what direction
in
I
which
think they're going to go
you
with.
can
Do I think
establish
sleep
cause and
deprivation is
effect.
going to
So
help
you
students
cannot
out?
say that something
Probably
causes another
not.
thing to
I'm gonna
happen
say it
unless you do an
negatively
experiment.
impacts students.
So I'm
technically
choosing a
speaking,
direction,
only
choosing
certain
that
science
as one
fields
increases,
get to say
the other one
that
decreases.
something
As you get
causes
less
another
sleep,
thing.
then your score
I know
is
sometimes
also
it seems
going to
like
go down. Obviously, this
so
is caused by blah, blah, blah.
hypotheses need to be directional,
but
but
if
if
we're
we're
talking
talking focused,
about
we need
sort
to
of these
define
larger
how we're going to define
societal
things.
studies, then we can just say
and
that
then
things are
also we sort of have two
supported
hypotheses
by
in science.
our ideas.
So
We
whenever
can't
we
actually
talked
say
about
that they are
hypothesis
caused
before
by
in a
something.
science class,
And then
it
also an
should have been
experiment,
something like
you get to
it is
randomly
a-
assign
an idea,
different variables,
maybe
to different
sort of
groups,
working,
or perhaps different participants
idea that
to
you
different
have
groups,
about
and
a
that
prediction
kind of
about how
helps
something's
tie
going to
in here
happen,
too.
how something's going to work.
And
Starting off with
it can
the
be
hypothesis.
right or wrong.
This is part of an experiment, but
In
hypothesis
actual
is
research
something that you're going to
we
have,
talk about the null
regardless of what
hypothesis.
quantitative
So null means zero.
study you might do.
And the null hypothesis
The thing about a
means
hypothesis
I
is it's
can't
got to have a
prove
direction
that
so
X causes
you
Y.
usually need to
Instead,
pick
I can
how
only
you think
show
X is going to change
that
Y.
X and Y are
So
definitely
if
related.
my study is
the null
that I think
hypothesis
sleep
is always written
deprivation
out as
will
there's
affect
no
student
statistical
scores,
relationship between
then
the
I
two
usually
things.
have to make
I'm
a
prediction about what direction I think they're going to go.
This X
Do I think
never
sleep deprivation is
affects
going to
this
help
Y.
students
So
out?
sleep
Probably
deprivation
not.
and
I'm going to
student
say it
scores
negatively
are not even
impact
related.
students.
And
So
the
I'm
alternative
choosing a
hypothesis
direction,
is the thing I actually
choosing
think or
that
believe.
as
It
one
is
increases,
as
the other one
students
decreases.
get less sleep,
As you get less and
then
less
their
sleep,
scores go down.
then your score.
And then
is
I would
also,
usually, like I said, pick
go down. That increase or
So,
decrease.
hypotheses
So we
need
can't
to be
always prove
directional.
things,
They usually
but
need to
our
be
goal is
focused.
to
We
reject
need
the
to
null
define
hypothesis.
how we're going to
This
define
is just
things,
kind of a part of
one
statistics. This is part of the
And
analysis
then also
that
we
we'll
sort
do
of have two
on our
hypotheses in
and
science.
we'll talk more
So
about
whenever
how
we talked about
we
hypothesis
actually kind of word
before in a
this,
science class,
when we talk
then
about
it should have been
analyzing our
something like
results. It is a
these are just
an
some
idea
memes idea,
this
or
is kind of a long
maybe a
presentation,
sort
so
of
I'm just going to go right past
idea
them, but
that
I
you
thought they were
have
funny.
about a
Right, so
prediction
building
about
an
how
experiment,
something's
we
going to
have
happen,
an
how something's
experimental
going to
group.
work.
That's the group that receives
it can
the
be
treatment.
right or wrong.
If we're talking about people, or
in actual research,
plants,
we talk
or
about
bacteria,
the null hypothesis.
So null means zero.
A lump of metal.
And the null
it doesn't
hypothesis
really
means
the experimental group.
I
It's
can't
the thing that we are
prove
changing
that
one
X
variable
causes Y
about, and
instead
then
I can
response.
only show
Then we have our control
that
group, so it does
X
not
and
receive
Y
the
are
intervention.
definitely
It's used
related.
as a compare.
So the null hypothesis is
in
always
some
written
studies
out as
there's
nearly
no
impossible to
statistical
have a
relationship
control group
between the two
might
things
just
that I'm
be
studying
unethical
as
to
in
do so.
So we'll
This
talk about that
X
too in a second.
never affects this Y.
So
in an
sleep
ideal
deprivation in
experiment,
student scores are
you
not
would do
even
something
related.
called a double-blind
And the
study.
alternative hypothesis is the thing I actually
This
think or believe.
happens a lot more in medical research.
So when a
students get less
single
sleep,
blind study
then their
is,
scores go down.
and then I would
Basically
usually
have
have
like
like
a group of
participants
here
that
and
some of them receive actual
so we can always
medication,
prove things, but
our
our
goal
goal
is
is
to
to
reject
reject
the
the
null
placebo,
hypothesis,
right?
This is just kind of a part
And
of
in a
statistics. This is part of the analysis that we'll do on our
they
data.
don't know which
And
one
we'll
they're
talk
getting.
more about how we
In
actually
a
kind of word
double-blind
this,
study,
when
we
talk
say
about
the researcher
analyzing our
maybe should
results.
also not know
These
which
are just some memes.
participant
This is kind
is
of a long
getting which
presentation,
thing,
so I'm
which
just going to
thing
go
is
right
the
past
medicine
them, but I thought they
or
were
the
funny.
placebo.
Right,
And
so
that's
building
done
an
to help
experiment, we have an
reduce
experimental group.
researcher bias.
That's the group
also,
that
because maybe the
receives
researcher
the
is going to end
treatment.
up, if we're
sort
talking
of
about people,
unconsciously
or if we're talking
giving
about
the
plants
medicine
or bacteria,
to the person who looks
or
the sickest.
a lump of metal. It
Or
doesn't
maybe
really
they're
matter.
giving
the
the
experimental
placebo
group
to
is
the
the
person
thing that
who
they
they
think
think
has
changing
like the
one
least severe
variable
symptoms
about, and then seeing if that thing
and
responds.
maybe they're not even really
Then we
aware
have
that
our
they're
control
doing that.
group,
Maybe
so
they
it
think
does
it's
not receive the
random, and
intervention.
finding out
It's
it's really
used
not.
as a
So a
compare.
double-blind study helps sort of
In some
protect
studies,
against
it's nearly
the
impossible to have
idea
control group, or
of
it might just be unethical
having
to do
these
so.
implicit
So we'll talk about that
biases
too in a second.
for researchers.
And then
So,
finally, you can do what's called a
in
triple
an
blind
ideal
study
experiment,
if the researcher and the
you
person
would do
analyzing the
something
data
called
are
a
not the same
double-blind
person.
study.
This would be more on like a larger
This
scale kind of study
more in
that
medical
we
research.
are not
So
doing.
what a
So we're
single
not going to worry
blind
about it.
study is
Right.
basically we have
So
our
here's an
three
example
participants here.
of an experiment. So we'll
And
test
some of them
scores be
receive
affected by
actual maybe
distracting
medication,
noises.
and then some
so we
of
have
them
our
receive a
control
placebo,
group,
right?
It's
A
a bunch
sugar
of
pill.
kids studying
And in
just
a
in a regular environment.
single
in
blind
our experimental
study,
group,
they don't know which one they're
who
getting.
is receiving the treatment.
In a
Again,
double-blind
just a
study,
couple
we
of
say the
memes
researcher
about
maybe
control
should
group,
also not
and
know
specifically
which
rats.
participant is getting
All right,
which thing.
so
which thing is like
we'll
the
go back up to that
medicine
second.
or the placebo.
Right. So what is a variable? Though?
And
We've
that's
been
done
talking
to
about
help
independent
reduce
dependent variables.
researcher bias also,
And a
because
variable
maybe the
is
researcher is
so
going
many
to end
things.
up
So it's any property or
unconsciously
characteristic
giving
the
that's
medicine
measurable
specifically
to
that
the
we can
person who
measure,
looks the sickest,
and then can take
or
on
maybe
more
they're
than one
giving the
value
placebo
or
to the person
vary,
who they think has
right?
like the least severe
So
symptoms.
you got to be able to measure it. That's
And
important.
maybe they're not even really aware that they're
and
doing
then
that.
also
Maybe
it's
they
got to
think
have
it's random
discrete
and
values.
finding out it's really not.
So continuous
double-blind study
variables
helps
are ones that can take on any number of values, like
the
temperature.
Temperature can be negative, it can be zero, it can
having
be
these
positive
implicit
number on it to a
biases
certain point.
for researchers.
And then discrete
finally, you can do
variables
what's
are
called
sort
a
of
triple
limited
blind
in the number of
study
values
if
they can take.
the researcher and the person
my example
analyzing
was
the
the
data
number
are
of
not the
cats
same
you own.
person. This would be
Because you
more
can
on
own
like a
2
larger
cats,
scale
and you
kind
can
of
own
study
3
that we
cats,
are
or you
not
probably
doing.
do
So
not
we're not
own
going to worry
2
about it.
and a half cats.
Right. So here's an example.
Right.
The
The
most
most
important one is the
we'll
independent and the dependent variable.
by
So independent variables are the variables that are manipulated by the research studying just in a regular environment and their experimental group. So you can only change one variable at a time. Otherwise, it's really difficult to tell what's actually happening.
Control group.
And then the dependent variable is the changes you observe during the experiment. Sometimes the idea is the dependent variable might be the thing that you measure. Right, so what is a variable? We've been talking about independent and dependent variables. Like lower level science classes, I tend to use this sentence stem to help people realize so it's any property or characteristic that's measurable, specifically that we can measure, depends on the take on more than one value. That's how you know which one is the dependent variable, right? And which one is the independent variable. You got to be able to measure it. That's important. Right. Other variables are the idea of extraneous variables. So continuous variables are ones that can take on any number of values, like temperature. Temperature can be negative, it can be zero, it can be any positive number. Sometimes they are called confounding variables. And then discrete variables are sort of limited. Example, you want to give a survey to people, and one of your participants has my example was the number of cats you survey. Because you don't actually get to go ask that person, like, hey, why did you rush through my survey, right? You don't really get to follow up with them because that would be an interview and not a survey. Right. The most important one is the idea of having a headache is an extraneous variable. So independent variables are the variables that are manipulated by the variables that you do control for. I don't know why there's a typo here. Would be if I wanted to measure so you can only change one variable at a time. Otherwise, it's really difficult to tell what's actually happening. This is the benefit. And the dependent variable is the changes you observe during the experiment. experiments.
working with
Sometimes
people is
the
that
idea
you have
is like
more
dependent variable
control,
might be the
more
thing that you
covariates,
measure as a
more
result of having
constants,
changed
more
it.
things you are in charge of
In
controlling.
my
for,
like lower level science
right?
classes,
So
I
if I'm
tend to use
working
this
with
sentence stem to
amoebas,
help people
they
realize which
pretty much
one
do
is
what
the
I say.
DV and the IV.
Unfortunately, I
So if you
cannot
can
go
put
interview
the
an amoeba after
blankety
the
blank
fact and ask
depends
them
on
amoeba,
the
why did you do
blankety
the
blank
things?
then that's how you know
Right?
which one
So the
is
benefits of
dependent
working with
variable
people
and which one is the independent
that
variable.
we are able to really ask some good why
Other
questions.
variables
And the benefits
are
of
the
not
idea
working with
of
people
extraneous
is
variables.
controls.
So these are the ones that are not under investigation, but may impact
So let's
your
practice
data.
real quick. We can't control for all of these.
I like this one because it's nice.
Sometimes
and
they
simple,
are called
right?
confounding
So experimental
variables.
group receives the
So
treatment.
example, you want to give a
Control
survey to
group
people,
does
and
not.
one of your participants
My
has a
independent
headache,
variable
and they
is
rush through your
test
survey.
scores.
You don't actually get to go ask that
Oh,
person.
sorry, my dependent
like,
variable
hey,
is test
why did you
scores?
rush through my
And
survey?
then my
right?
independent variable
you don't really get
is
to follow up with
the
them because
band
that would be an interview
lane,
and not a
right?
survey.
So,
But the
variable
idea of having a
depends
headache
on
is an
independent
extraneous
variable.
variable that you're not able to control.
Then there are covariates.
Those are variables that you
some things
do
that I would
control
not
for. So an example would be
able to really
if
know
I
or
wanted to
control
measure the
for.
effect of temperature on plant growth,
If
then
one of
I
these
would
participants
control my
recently
setting
had
for
a
light
breakup,
and moisture.
I might not have asked
This is
them
the
about
benefit
that might
in
impact how they
experiments,
do
especially
on
in
my
science,
tests.
with not working with people,
But
is that you
it
have
would not be something
more
that I would really be able to
control,
account
more
for.
covariates, some
More
controls,
constants,
though,
more
are
things
things
you
that
are
I
in
can
charge of
control.
controlling
So if they're taking the
for,
same test,
right?
that would be
So
important.
if I'm working with
right?
amoebas,
If this group,
they pretty much do what I
taking
say.
is super easy.
Unfortunately, I cannot go
Eighth grade
interview
history
an
test
amoeba after the fact
and
and
this
ask them,
group
amoeba,
is taking
why did
an
you do
AP
the
calculus
things?
exam,
Right?
So the
Then
benefits of
perhaps
working with
the
people
band is not the
is
reason
that
this group
we are
does so much
able
better
to really
than
ask
this
some
group.
good why questions.
So
and
I want to make
benefits
sure they're
of
the same
not working
tests.
with people.
I want to make sure
is
it's the same testing
controls
environment.
people. So the same rooms.
So
not
let's
only
practice
the same
real quick.
rooms, but the same temperature.
I like this
Perhaps
one
in
because it's
both
nice
locations,
and simple.
perhaps not
right?
just the
So
same
experimental
temperature, the same
group
amount of time
receives the
studying,
treatment,
and then if
control
I want to be
group
really good
does
about
not.
this, perhaps
My
this
independent
is the same
variable
group
is
of
test
people.
scores.
Perhaps it's not the exact same test.
Oh,
but
sorry, my
maybe it's a
dependent
similar
variable is
enough
test
test that I don't
scores,
have to worry
and then
about
my independent
if this
variable
person
is
remembers the same
the
information
band
over here,
lane,
right, and whatnot.
So
Dependent variable depends on independent variable. Okay,
so
back to variables.
Covariates.
So some things that I would we're going to end up kind of returning back to when we're talking about how to analyze our data.
If
but essentially
one of these
variables can
participants
have
recently
had a breakup for
I might not have asked them
scales
about
of
that. That might
measurements.
impact how they
these
do on my
matter
test.
because they tell us
But
what statistical tests
it would not
we
be something
can
that I would
use
really
to
be able to
analyze
account
them.
for.
So
Some
nominal
controls,
variables
though,
are
are
things that I
things
can control.
that
So if
don't
they're
really have
taking
a
the same
number,
test, that would
they
be
have a
important.
name, they have a
right?
category.
If this
sort
group
of classify them.
is
So
taking
here's some
a
examples.
super easy,
Maybe gender,
8th grade history
or
test,
marital status,
and
or
this
personality
group
type,
is taking an AP
or
calculus
experimental
exam,
condition
then
like treatment or
perhaps the
control.
band is not the reason that this
So
group
marital
does
status,
so much better,
right, only has a
this
few
group.
different options.
So I want to make sure
They're
they're the
either
same
single,
test,
or
I
you're
want to make sure
married,
it's the
or
same testing
maybe
environment,
divorced, or maybe
so
widowed.
the same rooms,
Not
or
only the same rooms,
opposite.
but the same
temperature.
So we only have like 4 different
Perhaps
ways
in
that
both
can vary.
locations,
So it does
perhaps
vary,
not just the
which
same
makes it a
temperature,
variable.
the same
It is
amount of time they
measurable,
spent
which
studying,
makes it a
and then
variable.
if I want to
But
be
it doesn't
really,
have a
really
number
good about
assigned
this,
with it.
perhaps
So I wouldn't use a
group
statistical
of
test that
people.
uses numbers.
Perhaps it's not the exact same
Ordinal
test,
is used
but
to
maybe
rank
it's a
order
similar enough
objects or
test that I don't have to worry about if this
placing
person
competition,
remembers the same
social
information
class,
over here.
perhaps,
And whatnot. And then letter grade, right? Comparing students who get an A to students who get a DC. Okay. So back to
interval
variables.
data is used to rank order equal intervals.
We're going to
between
end
numbers.
up kind of returning back
This
to
is
temperature
and
analyze our
IQ.
data. So
But
these are our
essentially
numbers.
Variables can have
They go from
0
4
on up to
scales of
whatever.
measurements.
These
And
matter
there's an
because
equal
they
distance
tell us
between
what
each number,
statistical
between each
tests
one.
we can use to
And then
analyze
ratio
them.
is basically
So
the same thing,
nominal
except for this time with a
variables are
true
things
0.
that
So if
don't
you're
have
studying
a
physics, the
number,
difference between
they have a
Celsius and
name, they have a
Fahrenheit and
category,
Kelvin is that
we
only
sort of
Kelvin has a
classify them.
true
So here's some
0.
examples.
Everything else
Maybe
is
gender,
really close to
or
0,
marital
but approaching
status,
it.
or personality type,
Response time,
or
height and
an
weight,
experimental condition like
income,
treatment or
and group
control.
size.
So these two marital
are
status,
the numbers,
right, only has a
but
few different
only
options.
If it includes 0, does it
You're
get to
either
be a
single,
ratio
or you're married, or maybe
Sorry,
divorced,
ratio
or maybe
variable.
widowed.
Right, so
Or
sometimes you can't do an
opposite.
experiment. Sometimes it's not actually
so we only have
ethical
like 4
to
different
assign
ways
people
that
to an
can vary. So
experimental
it
group
does vary.
or a control
Which makes
group,
it a
right?
variable.
It is
Sometimes you
measurable,
are just stuck
makes it
with
a
a bunch of
variable, but
participants.
it doesn't have a number
So
assigned with it.
quasi
So I
means
wouldn't
kind of,
is a statistical
and quasi-experimental is where participants are not randomly assigned to objects or individuals. They're already in their natural competition. Social class,
so when I come into my classroom
perhaps,
and I have like 30
and then letter
students,
grade,
I
right?
get to randomly
Students
assign
who get
them
an A to
to
students
my
who get a
classroom.
DC.
They're just the participants. That
Interval
I have.
data is
is used to rank
An
order
example would
equal
be a
intervals
hospital
between
introduces
numbers.
a new order entry system
This
and
is
wishes to study the
temperature
impact
and
of
IQ
this on the
So
number of
these are our numbers.
medication-related adverse effects.
They go
before
from
and after
0
intervention.
on up
So it would be
to whatever.
unethical for the
And
hospital
there's an equal distance
to
between each number.
not
between
do
each one.
this with their whole population.
And then ratio
or
is
to maybe
basically the same
assign
thing,
people
except
to
for
go
this
be
time
at
with
a
a
different
true
hospital under
zero.
a different order
So
entry
if you're studying
system.
physics, the
And so
difference
therefore they
between
have to study
Celsius and Fahrenheit
everyone
and
in
Kelvin
this.
is that only Kelvin has a true zero.
Everything
Right.
else is
Another
really
type of
close to zero,
quantitative.
but
So now we're getting
approaching it.
into non-experimental
Response
quantitative
time,
designs.
height and weight,
One
income,
is a
and
clinical
group
study.
size. So these
Most
two
likely there
are
will
the
not be
numbers,
many of us doing
but
one of these kinds of
only
studies,
if
but
it
a lot of
includes
you are
zero
interested in
to be a
medicine, so I wanted to
ratio.
talk about it. So a clinical study is exactly what it sounds like. It's that used in
Right,
a
so
medical
sometimes
or
you can't do an
clinical setting.
experiment.
And
Sometimes
other
it's
types
not
of
actually
research
ethical
involving
to
typically
assign
human
people
beings,
to an experimental
although that
group
does not
or
have
a
to
control
be the
group,
case,
right?
as animal
Sometimes
research is
you
often
are just
started
stuck
first.
with a bunch of participants.
So
Epidemiological
quasi
is
means
one
kinda,
version of this in
and
which we're
quasi-experimental
tracking
is
the
where
prevalence of the
participants
disease,
are not randomly
characterizing its
assigned
natural
to an
history,
experimental or control group.
identifying
They're already in their
determinants or
natural settings
causes
or
of
groups.
the disease.
So when I come into my classroom, where I have
this can happen not just in a medical lab, but elsewhere.
So
To
for
my
example,
classroom,
during
they are just the participants
COVID,
that I have.
there was a lot
An
of
example would be a
epidemiological
hospital
tracking that
introduces
actually
a new
took
order
place
entry system and wishes to study the impact
wastewater treatment
of this on the number of
facilities, sewage
medication
centers, that
related
kind of
adverse
thing,
effects before and after the
because
intervention.
it turns out that people's
So
poop
it would be
is a pretty
unethical
convenient
for the hospital
source
to
of DNA to
not do
extract
this with
and
their
run
whole
analysis
population,
on and sort of
or
know
to
what's
maybe
going on in a
assign
people to go be at a
population,
different
as
hospital
opposed
or
to
just
just
going
going
up
up
to
entry
random people
system.
on the street and
And
being
so therefore
like,
they
hey,
have to
can I get a
study
jigsaw?
everyone in this.
Another statistical another type of quantitative. So now we're getting into
non-experimental
is the
quantitative
meta-analysis.
designs.
It uses a
One
statistical
is a
analysis,
clinical study,
which is why I can't talk tonight.
Most likely there will
So a
not be many of us
meta-analysis
doing one of
is
these kinds of
you
studies,
saying,
but a
hold
lot
up,
of you are interested
there's
in
been
medicine, so I
20
wanted to talk
different
about it.
studies on
So a
this
clinical
topic.
study is exactly
Maybe
what it
it's a
sounds
really
like.
hot
It's that
topic.
used in a medical
Say
or
it's
clinical
like,
setting,
do video
and
games
other types
cause
of
people
research
to be
involving
violent?
typically human beings.
So
although
you
that does
might
not have
look
to be
at
the case.
all of these
Animal
different
research
scientific
is often
studies,
started
some of which
first.
say yes, our data shows this, some of which
Epidemiological
says
is
no,
one
our
version
data
of this,
finds
in which
this,
we're
and
tracking
some of which maybe
the
say,
prevalence of
well,
the disease,
sure, but it
characterizing
depends.
its natural history,
And you take
identifying
all of that data
determinants
together.
or causes of
Hopefully,
the disease.
it is
So
sort of using
this
some
can
of the
happen
same
not just
measurements,
in a medical lab,
to find
but
things.
elsewhere.
And then
So
you
for
look for an
example,
overall
during
trend.
there
There
are
are
a
a
couple different
there was a
statistical
lot of
analysis that you can use
epidemiological
to do a
tracking that actually
meta-analysis
took
that I
place
think are very
at
achievable for a high school student.
wastewater treatment
But we will
facilities,
talk more
sewage
about it when we
centers,
get
that
to
kind of thing.
analyzing our research. And we
Because
might
it turns out that
bring,
people's poop
our AP
is a
stats
pretty
teacher on board to help
convenient
us a little bit with this.
source of DNA.
So meta-analysis can be
to
performed when there
extract
are
and
multiple
run
scientific
analysis
studies
on
addressing the
and
same
sort of
question.
know what's going on in a
And
population,
each individual study
as
reports
opposed to just going up to random
measurements that are
people on the
expected
street
to have
and
some
being like,
degree
hey,
of
can I get a
error.
jigsaw?
So what we're doing is we're looking at all of these things and we're trying to get rid of
Another
that degree of error.
statistical
So this
test
is one of the
that
few
is-
quantitative
another
research
quantitative
science
method
that uses
is the
secondary
meta-analysis.
data, right? So
It
this is
uses
where
a
you can go
statistical
back into those
analysis, which is
databases
why I can't talk tonight.
of like
So
history
a meta-analysis
or the
is
records
you saying,
or
hold up, there's been
um,
20
easily
different
accessible information
studies
on the internet.
this
You
topic.
can really
Maybe
sort of
it's
do
a really
deep
hot
dive
topic.
into
Say it's
how these
like,
things are
do
related.
video games cause people to be violent?
All right. Trend analysis
So
is one I
you
was not
might
super familiar
look
with.
at all of these different scientific
essentially,
studies, some of which
is a
say
method used to
yes, our data
forecast
shows
a
this,
future
some of
trend
which says
based
no,
upon
our
past
data
data.
finds this, and
It
some of which
uses
maybe
what's called
say,
a regression
well,
analysis.
sure, but it depends.
And if I'm being
And you
honest,
take
kind
all
of
of that
seems
data
just like a
together.
correlation. But
Hopefully it is.
So a trend
sort of
analysis
using some of the
is
same
used a lot in
measurements,
business and finance,
to
right? So
find
I know
things.
how
And
our
then you
sales
look for
did
an
last
overall
quarter.
trend. Let's predict how
There
they're
are a
going to do
couple
this
different
quarter.
statistical
We can also use
analyses
them
that
in
you can
environmental
use to
sciences,
do a
so I
meta-analysis.
know what the
that I think
climate
are
was
very
like
achievable
last
for a high school
eon.
student.
What's it going to be like
But we will
this
talk more
eon?
about it when we get to
So
analyzing our
essentially,
research.
we use
we
the
might
word trend
bring,
analysis to say,
our
okay,
AP
we've
stats
got a
teacher
lot of
on board to help us a
historical
little bit with
data,
this.
and now I'm
So meta-analysis
projecting
can be performed
for
when
what
there are
it's going to
multiple
look like in
scientific
the future.
studies addressing the same question.
And each
All right,
individual study
correlations
that are expected to have some
correlations.
degree
Notice
of
that
error.
correlations
So
are
what we're
not
doing is we're looking at all these
causation.
things. We're
You
trying to
know
get rid
why?
of that
Because we
degree
can't
of
do an
error.
experiment on them.
So this is one of the few quantitative research.
So this is
science
also
that
why
uses secondary data.
right? So this
A
is
lot
where
of
you
times
can
we
go
say we
back
don't
into
know
those
anything
databases
because a lot of studies don't get to do
history
true
or
experiments, which
records
means we
or
can't say that absolutely
easily
causes
accessible
something.
information on
There's
the internet.
sometimes just too many
You can really
variables to
sort of
control
do
or
a
measure
deep
for.
dive into.
So a correlation is
how
where
these
we
things
know a
related.
relationship exists between two or more measures.
All right, trend
There's too
analysis
many
is
other
one I
variables
was
to
not super
determine a
familiar
cause,
with.
and we can't do an
So
experiment.
essentially, it
So an
is a
example
method
would
used to
be,
forecast
I
a
think the
future
time of
trend
day
based upon past data.
has an effect on
It
students'
uses what's called a
behavior.
regression
Right?
analysis.
My first period class does
and
not act the
being
same
honest,
as my
kind of
fourth
seems
period
just
class.
like a correlation. But
So
that's
unfortunately, a couple things.
So trend
we need a good
analysis
sample
is used a
size
lot
for
in
this.
business and
We need
finance,
to control
right? So
for
I know
so
how our
many
sales did last
variables.
quarter.
So many
Let's
variables
predict how they're going to do this
by,
quarter.
or sort of linked to this.
We can also use them
and
in
therefore
environmental
I can't really
sciences, so I
establish
know what the
causality.
climate was like last eon. What's it going to be
All
like
right.
this
Sometimes
eon?
in correlational studies,
So
there
essentially, we
is a
use the word
relationship
trend
that
analysis
you're just
to
not
say,
seeing
okay,
because
there's
there's
a lot of
third variable
historical
involved.
data.
So
And now I'm
in
projecting
this graph for
we
what it's going to look like
see
in the
that
future.
as ice cream sales increase, so do shark
All
attacks.
right, correlations.
However, both of them are just caused
that
by
correlations
the weather,
are not
right?
causations.
As it
You
gets
know
hotter
why?
outside,
Because we
more
can't do
people
an
buy ice cream
experiment
because
on
it's
them.
hot and it sucks.
So this
And
is
then
also
as it gets hot outside, more people are at the beach.
A lot of
and
times
so
when
they're
we
coming
say
in
we don't
closer
know
contact
anything
with
because
sharks.
a lot of studies
Sharks
don't
don't
just
get to
decide
do
to eat
true
people
experiments,
in July,
which means
for no
we
reason.
can't say that something
So
absolutely
these two
causes
variables
something.
are
Sometimes
related.
just too many variables
They're
to control or
increasing
measure
together.
for. We know
So a
that
correlation
they're
is where
together,
we know a
according to our
relationship
graph.
exists between two or more
even ran a
measures.
statistical
There's
test
too
that
many
says
other
they're
variables
super
to determine
highly
a cause,
correlated,
and we can't do an
and
experiment.
unfortunately, though,
So an example would be
there's this
I
third
think
thing
the
that
time
we're
of
not
day
taking account for.
has an effect on students' behavior.
Right? I really
My
like
first
this one.
period
So
class
sometimes
does not
you
act the
can
same
choose any
as
two
my fourth
random
period
variables.
class.
And
So
if you
unfortunately,
find enough random things,
you can get a
we need
correlation
good sample
for.
size for
Maybe
this.
even a strong
We need to
correlation.
control for
So
many
this is
variables.
Nicolas Cage,
So many variables are caused
movies
by
that he appeared
or sort
in,
of
so the
linked
number
to
of
this.
films that he appeared
And
in.
therefore, I can't
It
really
would
establish
the number of people who
causality.
drown by falling into a pool. All right. Sometimes in correlational studies
are
there
just a coincidence.
is a relationship that you're just not seeing because there's a third variable involved.
Is
So
ACT scores.
In
So
this
the reason we
graph,
use
ACT scores
see
whenever
that
we're
as
looking
ice cream
at
sales
getting into
increase,
college,
so
which a
do
lot of you
shark
guys are doing
attacks.
right now anyway.
However,
because there's a
both of them
moderate
are just
correlation.
caused
It's only a medium
by the
one
weather,
between
right? Essentially,
as
your
it gets hotter
freshman
outside, more
GPA
people buy
and your
ice cream
ACT
because
score.
it's hot.
And so a lot of times colleges
And
use
then
that
also,
because it's
as
a
it
pretty
gets
good
hot outside,
predictor
more
of
people
who's
are at
going
the
to stick
beach,
around.
and so they're coming into closer
like full 4 years
with
of
sharks.
university,
Sharks
and
don't
therefore
just
it's a good
decide to eat
predictor of
people
who they
in
should
July
give
for no
scholarship money
reason.
to in the first place.
So these two
And
variables,
that's just
are
one way
related.
in which
They're
a
increasing
correlation
together.
is used to
We
make
know
a pretty
that they're
big
close
decision.
together according to our graph.
The last thing I want to talk about with quantitative methods
that says they're
is
super highly correlated.
And
the
unfortunately,
research
though,
process, right?
there's this
Where you
third thing
formulate
that
a
we're not taking
hypothesis,
account
you
for.
run the test to confirm it. Maybe it
Uh,
contradicts your
I really like this
hypothesis,
one. So
and then you're
sometimes
back to
you
the drawing
can choose
board
any
again
two
and
random
again and
variables.
again.
And if you find enough random things, you can get a correlation for, maybe even a strong correlation. So this is Nicolas Cage movies that he appeared in, so the number of films that he appeared in, with the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool. Sometimes relationships are just a coincidence. Last but not least, I want to talk about correlation is ACT scores. And so the reason we use ACT scores whenever we're looking at getting into college, which a lot of you guys are doing right now anyway, is because there's a moderate correlation. So only a medium one between your freshman GPA and your ACT score. And so a lot of times colleges use that because it's a pretty good predictor of who's going to stick around their like full 4 years of university, and therefore it's a good predictor of who they should give scholarship money to in the first place. And that's just one way in which a correlation is used to make a pretty big decision. All right, the last thing I want to talk about with quantitative methods is the research process, right? Where you formulate a hypothesis, you run the test to confirm it, maybe it contradicts your hypothesis, and then you're back to the drawing board again and again and again.